For me, it's always like this. On the surface, this is a line that could mean nothing, or everything. But in the world of Silent Hill, it carries the weight of one of the most tragic stories in modern media. Everyone who ends up in Silent Hill has to face their own demons, but Angela's story was a bit different. It was a lot darker, and she didn't really have that hope for redemption like James had. Her story reflects a part of all of us, the part that carries guilt we can't shake or the scars we can't hide. Some may sympathize with Angela because of the choices she made. Others may empathize with her because they've lived through something similar. But there are people in this world who you can save from their problems, but never from themselves. For someone who endured so much, why did Silent Hill treat her the worst? She's clearly one of the most important characters in the game, even appearing on the cover art of the PlayStation 2 version. Silent Hill is all about confronting the horrors born from past trauma, and Angela arguably endured the most horrifying past of all, so why wasn't she the main character? Silent Hill is a town with a supernatural power. It can bring a person's worst fears and traumas to life by manifesting the monsters in their heads as physical beings that they're forced to confront. Everyone drawn to the town experiences a subjective reality, which means that the town's horrors are different from person to person, each shaped by their deepest guilts, regrets, and emotional wounds. Contrary to popular belief, Silent Hill isn't a place of redemption. It's more of like a mirror that reflects the inner turmoil of those who enter it. Regardless of whether a person is innocent or guilty, they all will and eventually do go through the same nightmares. In a way, the town judges you without being judgmental. It doesn't pass verdicts or offer forgiveness, it just simply shows you who you really are when there's nowhere left to hide. And one of the best examples of this is through the story of Angela Orosco. James Sunderland is a man haunted by an atrocity that his subconscious refuses to forgive or let him forget. The emotional numbness caused by his buried guilt doesn't let him fully remember what he's done. All he knows is that he received a letter from his wife, Mary, who passed away 3 years ago, asking him to meet her in Silent Hill. This mysterious letter is what draws him to the town, setting his journey in motion. But James isn't the only one called to Silent Hill. Others are drawn there, each carrying their own emotional burdens. Their interactions with James can seem confusing or unsettling at first, leaving players puzzled about what's really bothering these characters. But if you take a closer look, it's clear that they're more than just characters. They're pieces of guilt, regret, and buried pain, all twisted by Silent Hill. As James makes his way towards Silent Hill, he encounters a young woman standing alone in a cemetery, gazing over a grave. She gives him directions to the town but warns him that something's wrong with it, urging him to stay away. It's clear she knows more about Silent Hill than she lets on. Their conversation seems ordinary on the surface, but James can't shake the feeling that something is off about her. She tells him she's looking for her mama, using a childlike term that feels out of place between two adults. It's a small detail, but it hints at something deeper, like she's stuck in the past somehow. Eventually they part ways, but this isn't the last time James sees her, because from here, everything begins to fall apart. As James explores the apartments of Silent Hill, he finds her again, but this time in a dark, empty room holding a knife covered in blood. She introduces herself as Angela. Her behavior is sort of erratic, shifting with every question James asks her. Concerned by the knife, James gently tells her that no matter what she's thinking, there's always another way. But Angela doesn't believe that. She responds with a hollow, bitter tone, saying that there's no point, that it's easier to run because that's all people like them deserve. She even tells him he's no different from her, foreshadowing a pain he hasn't faced yet. When James asks her if her mother isn't down, something in her shifts. She looks up suddenly and her voice becomes shakier, like the question dragged her back to a memory she didn't want to face. James then reveals that he's looking for his wife, though his words feel uncertain because deep down, he knows she's been gone for 3 years. Angela seems taken aback, almost like she's seeing right through him. She tells James that she needs to find her mama again, but this time, she hesitates a bit. She asks if he can hold on to the knife for her, admitting that she's not sure what she might do with it. But when James reaches out to take the knife, she completely breaks down, crying out that she's been bad. Then without another word, she drops the knife and runs away, leaving James and us with more questions than answers. But Angela's story doesn't stop there. Every time James runs into her, it's like peeling back another layer of her broken mind, revealing not just pieces of her past, but how deeply Silent Hill has twisted her sense of reality. When James finds her again, things start to make more sense, or at least the cracks begin to show. She tells him that she doesn't think her mother is in the town anymore, and that she might not even want to see Angela anymore. James tries to comfort her by saying that he's glad to see her, but Angela reacts with confusion, almost like no one's ever said that to her before. It's such a simple thing, but for her it's completely foreign. At this point, James is searching for Laura, a little girl he's seen wandering around the town, so he asks Angela if she's seen her. But the moment she hears the words "a little girl," something shifts. It's like the words trigger something deep inside her, something James can't see. Her eyes go wide with fear as she starts reacting to something standing behind James. She starts panicking, pleading with something only she can see. Her fear builds until she suddenly runs away, desperate to escape whatever just flashed through her mind. The next time James finds Angela, he finally sees what's really haunting her. She's curled up on the floor, pleading in fear, repeating over and over again that she'll be good, as if she's expecting to be punished. But she's not talking to James. She's trapped in a nightmare only she can see, terrified of something that's already there in her mind. And then out of nowhere, James is attacked by a monster that Angela calls Daddy. It's a grotesque figure with its body trapped in a box-like frame, twisting and writhing in unnatural ways. To James, it doesn't make much sense, but to Angela, it's the physical manifestation of something she's been running from her whole life. Silent Hill brought it to life, just for her. After James defeats the creature, Angela doesn't seem relieved. Instead, she lashes out, kicking the monster and screaming, letting out all the anger she's been holding in. When James tries to comfort her, she snaps at him, accusing him of being just like everyone else, saying he's only being nice because he wants something from her. Then her words hit a bit harder.
You could just force me. Like he always did. You disgusting pig.
It's in this moment that James starts to realize the monster wasn't just some random nightmare. It was her nightmare, a reflection of something unspeakable from her past. Angela's pain isn't just emotional, it's been carved into her reality, and Silent Hill just made sure she could never escape it. After her outburst, Angela's anger shifts into something colder, almost like she's studying James. She starts questioning him, pushing him to look inwards, asking him why he's actually in Silent Hill 4. James tries to brush it off, saying he's just looking for his wife, but Angela isn't buying it. She cuts right through his denial, accusing him of not wanting his wife around anymore, maybe even finding someone else. This hits a nerve.
No!
For the first time, James reacts with real anger, snapping back defensively. It's like she's seen straight through him, peeling back a truth he's too afraid to face. But as soon as she sees James's anger, she goes quiet. He can see it in her eyes and her voice. She just says she needs to find her mama and walks away again, leaving James with the weight of her words.
I never.
By the time James meets Angela again, her descent into despair is almost complete. This final encounter reveals the full extent of her personal hell. James finds her standing on a staircase engulfed in flames, but at first he doesn't react, almost like the fire isn't real to him. Angela sees James and, in her fragile state, mistakes him for her mother. She hugs him and says, "You're the only one left, now I can finally rest." But then reality catches up with her and she realizes that it's just James, not the person she was hoping for. It's heartbreaking because even in this moment, her trauma distorts what's right in front of her. As they talk, it becomes painfully clear that both James and Angela have been searching for something that isn't in Silent Hill, or maybe never was. Angela thanks James for saving her earlier, but admits that she wishes he hadn't. She tells him that even her mother said she deserved everything that happened to her. You can hear it in her voice. She's already decided that she's beyond saving.
Don't pity me. I'm not worth it.
She asks James if he can really fix all the neglect she's been through, if he can heal all her pain, but he doesn't answer. He just steps back. Before leaving, she asks James for the knife back, but when he refuses, she accuses him of keeping it for himself. But then without another word, she turns around and starts climbing the staircase. As James finally notices the flames around them, he says, "It's hot as hell in here." But that's when Angela stops and looks back at him and quietly says,
You see it too? For me, it's always like this.
She disappears into the fire, leaving James and us wondering if Silent Hill was ever the thing she needed to escape from. Angela is a girl deeply disconnected from reality, shaped by a lifetime of trauma. She grew up in a toxic, dysfunctional family where she faced physical, emotional, sexual, and psychological abuse. Her father, Thomas, was an aggressive alcoholic who hurt her in ways no child should ever experience, and her brother wasn't any better. But what may have hurt her the most was her mother's neglect, not just failing to protect her, but making her believe she deserved the pain. This environment shattered Angela's sense of self-worth. She developed severe depression, complex PTSD, and intense social anxiety, which is clear from how she struggles to communicate with James. She doesn't trust people, especially men, and she detaches from reality to cope with the overwhelming weight of her past. Even simple interactions feel like navigating a minefield for her. She couldn't escape, not in school nor at work, and at her job as a waitress, she dealt with harassment from people who reminded her of the abuse she faced at home, reinforcing the belief that she was trapped in a world that only saw her as an object. She even tried running away from her family, but her father dragged her back, erasing any illusion of freedom she thought she had. Eventually, Angela reached her breaking point, and she did the only thing she thought could free her. She ended the lives of her father and brother with the same knife she carries in Silent Hill. But even after they were gone, her suffering didn't really end, because Silent Hill isn't the one punishing her, she's punishing herself. She's trapped in a cycle of guilt and anger, torn between the shame of what she's done and the pain of what was done to her. Silent Hill just keeps the pain alive, making sure she still hears their voices even after they're gone. The three main people drawn to Silent Hill because of their traumas are James Sunderland, Angela Orosco, and Eddie Dombrowski. Each of them represents a different way of dealing with pain, and together they show us how guilt and suffering can twist the mind in very different ways. James ended up in Silent Hill because of the trauma he caused himself, something his mind refuses to fully accept. His wife didn't pass away naturally, she was suffering from a terminal illness that left her bedridden and in constant pain, both physically and emotionally. James ultimately ended her life not just to end her suffering, but because of the resentment and frustration he felt being trapped in a situation that he couldn't control. The stress of taking care of her life and the life he lost kept weighing on him until he couldn't tell if he was acting out of love or just trying to escape.
I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
Silent Hill forces him to confront that truth, no matter how hard he tries to bury it. Eddie's story is tragic in a different way, but just as disturbing. He was bullied his entire life because of his appearance, which led to deep issues with his self-image and anger. Eventually, he snapped. What started as a defense mechanism turned into a dangerous spiral, hurting anyone who mocked or threatened him, even resorting to deadly violence without hesitation. Eddie represents what happens when anger isn't processed, it's unleashed. He doesn't try to justify his actions the way James does. He embraces them, using violence to cover the hurt underneath. And because that's what he wanted, that's what Silent Hill gave him. Endless people to shoot to let his anger out. But here's the thing, Silent Hill isn't here to judge them. It doesn't decide who deserves to suffer, it's just a mirror reflecting the darkness that's already inside them. That's why James, Angela, and Eddie face such different horrors, because the real monsters were always there, long before they stepped into Silent Hill. Although Angela did something bad, her circumstances were completely different from Eddie's and James'. What she did came from a place of pure desperation. She didn't deserve what happened to her at all. But even after breaking free from her abusers, she still couldn't escape the prison of her own mind. That's what drew her to Silent Hill, not for punishment, but because she couldn't outrun her pain. When Angela first meets James, she warns him that there's something wrong with the town. It's a small moment, but it shows she already understands Silent Hill in a way James doesn't. Her suffering didn't start there, it followed her there. For Angela, Silent Hill isn't a place where her trauma began, it's where it refuses to end. One thing that stands out is how she constantly says she's looking for her mama. It's like she never had a chance to grow up emotionally. Why is she looking for her mother? Well, it could be for closure, hoping to find some kind of comfort even though her mother was part of the pain. Or maybe deep down, she's searching for her mother out of anger, to confront her and to make her face the same fate her father and brother did. Later, Angela tells James that there's no point in what they're doing and that they're all the same, and in a way, she's right. James, Angela, and Eddie have all done things they can't take back, but it's not about what they did, it's about how they're running from it. James is running from the guilt he refuses to face, Angela is running from the belief that she's beyond saving, and Eddie is running from the world that hurt him, lashing out before it can hurt him again. When Angela asks James, "Are you afraid?" it's more than just a question, it's like she already knows his fate long before he does. At one point, James reveals to Angela that his wife is dead, and the moment he says it, you can see her eyes shift. She doesn't just hear his words, she reads between them. She grows suspicious of him, almost like she can sense that James isn't telling the whole truth. She even hints at it, questioning whether he really wanted Mary around at all. To Angela, if that's true, it makes James no different from the people she fears the most. Then comes the knife. It's one of the most important symbols in Angela's story. It's not just a weapon for her, it's a reminder. To Angela, the knife represents the only control she's ever had in her life. It's the tool she used to fight back against the people who hurt her, and tragically, it's also the thing she considers using against herself. When she asks James to hold on to the knife for her because she's not sure what she might do with it, there's this vulnerable pause. As James reaches out to take it, Angela completely breaks down. It's like the act of handing it over forces her to confront not just what she's done, but what she's afraid she's capable of doing. She's terrified, not just of her past, but of herself. In that moment, she doesn't know how to process it, so she blames herself, crying out, "I've been bad," as if she's the one who deserves punishment. But the knife isn't just about Angela, it holds weight for James too. She accuses him of keeping it for himself, hinting at the dark thoughts he's been hiding. And she's not wrong, the knife symbolizes more than violence, it's like a gateway, a choice. Angela used it to escape her abusers. James carries it as a silent reflection of his own guilt, whether he admits it or not. In fact, the game subtly reflects this. If the player examines the knife too much, it increases the chance of triggering the in-water ending, where James succumbs to his guilt and takes his own life. The knife isn't just an object, it's a question. What do you do when the pain is too heavy to carry? For Angela, it was the only answer she ever had. For James, it's the answer he's trying to avoid. Later, when James tells Angela that he's happy to see her, her reaction says everything. She looks confused, like it's the first time anyone's ever said something like that to her. And it probably is. Angela didn't have a childhood filled with warmth or support. Her family issues left her emotionally isolated, unable to connect with people in any meaningful way. At home, she was treated like she didn't matter, and outside of it, she never found anyone who made her feel like she did. So when James says something so simple, it feels completely foreign to her, almost like she doesn't know how to process it. When James repeats himself, saying he's happy to see her alive, her mood shifts. It could mean a couple of things. Maybe she thought he was only glad she was physically alive, not that he actually cared about her as a person. To Angela, that might have felt like a reminder of how her family never cared about how she felt, just that she existed. After all, being alive doesn't mean you're really living. Or maybe, for a split second, she thought James was like everyone else, someone pretending to care, but really just looking to take advantage of her. That's the world she grew up in, where kindness always had strings attached. But when she realizes James genuinely meant it, that shift in her mood could be her dealing with something she's never felt before, the idea that maybe someone could care without wanting anything in return. And then when James asks her if she's seen a little girl, referring to Laura, the words little girl seem to trigger something deep in Angela. She doesn't react to the question itself, but to the memory it pulls out. To Angela, she'll always be that little girl, stuck in time, defined by the worst parts of her life. The part where James fights the monster feels like a direct confrontation with the entirety of Angela's past. It's like stepping into a nightmare shaped by her deepest and most painful memories. This monster is called the Abstract Daddy, and it's not just some random horror Silent Hill conjured up. It's a reflection of how Angela saw her father, distorted, grotesque, and overwhelming. Not just in appearance, but in how he made her feel, trapped, powerless, and suffocated. Abstract Daddy's design is disturbing and deliberately unsettling. It's like a large bed-like frame with two fused human-like figures struggling beneath a suffocating fleshy covering. The bodies seem twisted and contorted, as if they're trapped under the weight of something inescapable. The frame, or more likely the bed frame, symbolizes the kind of abuse Angela had to endure. The bodies being fused together in such an intimate, unnatural way shows how the trauma caused by her abusers is forever inseparable in her mind. Its movements are slow but forceful, dragging itself with an unnatural mechanical rhythm, as if it's both alive and lifeless at the same time. Its face is obscured, faceless even, because in Angela's mind it was never just about who it was, but also what it represented: relentless, suffocating fear. The way it looms over James, pressing down with its sheer size and presence, mirrors the emotional burden Angela carried her whole life. The environment where this fight happens feels like a distorted version of Angela's childhood home, a labyrinth, with narrow hallways and dead ends, symbolizing how she tried to escape but always found herself right back where she started. Throughout the halls, there are small closet-like spaces where James can hide. These spaces aren't just gameplay mechanics, they're symbolic. They represent the dark corners Angela may have hidden in as a child, trying to disappear from the horrors around her. But just like James can't stay hidden forever, eventually having to step out and face the monster, Angela couldn't stay hidden forever either. The environment itself is layered with disturbing imagery. The walls are raw and fleshy, almost like they're breathing, with leaking orifices and mechanical pistons thrusting rhythmically in and out. It's deeply unsettling because it's meant to be. It's sexually suggestive, reflecting the abuse Angela endured, though Silent Hill never states it outright. Instead, it leaves these haunting symbolic traces for the player to piece together. There are also some old broken TVs scattered throughout the area. They seem out of place at first, but they carry symbolic weight as well. Maybe Angela used them as a distraction, turning up the volume to drown out the reality that she couldn't escape. Or maybe she smashed them out of frustration as a way to retaliate against her father, breaking the only thing she could because she couldn't fight back against him directly. As the fight with Abstract Daddy progresses, the environment starts to fall apart. The walls, already raw and fleshy, begin to crack and crumble, almost as if the room can't hold itself together. It's a reflection of how Angela's father's actions didn't just hurt her, they destroyed their family and shattered any sense of safety they had at home. The collapsing walls symbolize how what was supposed to be a place of comfort and security became a fragile, broken space that could never be put back together. Abstract Daddy frequently disappears and then returns, crashing through walls without warning. It reflects how her father would appear out of nowhere, keeping her constantly on the edge and afraid. This unpredictability is what gave her the severe anxiety, never knowing when the next moment of fear would come. But here's what's truly unsettling. James doesn't even see Abstract Daddy the way Angela does. What's terrifying to him is only a shadow of what it really looks like through her eyes. And maybe that's the scariest part, not just the monster itself, but the fact that no one else can truly understand the depth of horror Angela lives with. After James defeats Abstract Daddy, Angela doesn't react with relief. Instead, she unleashes all her pent-up rage, kicking the lifeless monster and screaming as if she's trying to destroy more than just its body. But her anger isn't just aimed at the creature, it spills over onto James as well. She accuses him of being just like everyone else, saying he's only being nice because he wants something from her. Her words are sharp, laced with bitterness and distrust, as if she's been rehearsing them in her head long before she even met him. Then she throws out something even more devastating.
You don't have to lie. Go ahead. Say it. Or you could just force me. Like he always did. You disgusting pig. I hate you. I hate you.
It's a line that hits like a punch to the chest, not just for James, but for the player as well. In that moment, Angela's pain, fear, and trauma don't just surface, they explode. Raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. She's not seeing James as James anymore, she's projecting the ghosts of her past onto him, unable to separate her trauma from the present. But she doesn't just stop there, she shifts from lashing out to something colder, poking at James's own guilt. She accuses him of getting rid of his wife because he didn't want her around anymore, suggesting he probably found someone else. And the thing is, she's not entirely wrong. This is the first time James truly snaps. His defensiveness, his anger, it's not just at Angela's words. It's because deep down he knows there's truth in them, even if he's not ready to admit it. The shift is striking. Angela goes from being vulnerable to being confrontational, and James, who's been trying to hold himself together, finally cracks. But as soon as he shows that anger, Angela's demeanor shifts again. It's like flipping a switch. She shuts down, her voice flat, and her expression becomes more distant. This is more likely a trauma response that Angela developed because of her father. The moment she hears an angry voice, any confidence or curiosity she had disappears. She instantly shuts down, becoming quiet, submissive, and unable to question the aggressor, avoiding eye contact completely. She mutters that she needs to find her mama and walks away, leaving James standing there, not just questioning her, but also questioning himself. The final time James sees Angela is one of the most haunting moments in the game. He finds her standing on a burning staircase, flames roaring all around her, yet she stands there as if the fire doesn't even matter to her. At first, James doesn't react to the heat or the flames, it's like they aren't real to him. But to Angela, this isn't some surreal nightmare. This is, was, and always will be her reality. The fire isn't there for shock value, it represents Angela's personal hell, a place she's been trapped in long before she ever arrived in Silent Hill. She doesn't flinch, because for her, the world has always been on fire. Either she doesn't feel the flames at all, or she's been in them for so long that she's become numb to the pain. Silent Hill didn't create her suffering, it just gave it form. As they talk, Angela reveals just how deep her self-loathing runs. Her own mother, the one person who should have protected her, instead told her she deserved everything that happened to her. That kind of victim blaming didn't just hurt, it shaped Angela's entire sense of self. Over time, that voice became impossible to silence. When you hear something often enough, even the worst lies start to sound like the truth. Angela doesn't believe she's worth saving, she never did, but maybe it's because she was never allowed to. When she asks James if he can fix what's broken inside her, if he can take away all the pain she's been carrying, he doesn't respond, he simply steps back, and that silence says it all. Some wounds feel too deep to heal, especially when the person doesn't believe they deserve healing in the first place. As Angela stands there, she quietly asks James for the knife back, the same one she once held as a way out, but he refuses. Maybe he's trying to protect her, or maybe he's just afraid of what she'll do. Either way, it leaves her with no escape. In that moment, it feels like her fate was already decided, like no matter what, her pain was never meant to end. After everything she's been through, there's no amount of healing that will ever make her life normal again. Her fate was decided long before she ever stepped into Silent Hill. She will keep climbing that staircase over and over again until she finally makes that last decision, the choice to join the rest of her family. So why wasn't Angela the main character? After all, compared to James and Eddie, she experienced the most prolonged and diverse forms of trauma. Her monsters would have been far more terrifying, and Silent Hill through her eyes would have been an even darker, more horrifying place. But Silent Hill didn't treat Angela the worst because she deserved it. It's because her inner trauma was the most unbearable, even to herself. In a way, James represents us, the player. He's flawed, haunted by his own mistakes, and searching for answers he's not ready to face. Angela and Eddie aren't just supporting characters, they're reflections of James's potential paths. They represent two extremes on the spectrum of how people deal with trauma. While Angela's world is burning, Eddie's world is freezing. Angela's story shows us how the world can feel like hell for some, while Eddie's story reveals how it can be cold and cruel for others. It's a perfect contrast. Angela internalizes her pain, suffocating under the weight of it, while Eddie externalizes his pain, lashing out at the world around him. This is the difference between giving up and giving in. Angela gave up on the idea that things could ever get better. Eddie gave in to his rage, letting it define him. But Angela isn't just another tragic character, she's a reflection of what James could become if he surrendered to his guilt. While James searches for redemption, Angela has already decided it's out of reach. She's not there to be saved, she's there to show what happens when the darkness wins. Hard times can shape people, but there's a difference between the struggles you face as an adult and the ones you endure as a child. As an adult, hardships can sometimes make you stronger because you've had the chance to build resilience, to understand and process what's happening. But when the pain happens in childhood, it doesn't build strength the same way. It shapes your entire foundation. That's what makes Angela's struggles so different. She didn't carry trauma, she grew up with it, ingrained into who she is. And that's why empathy matters, because not everyone had the chance to learn how to fight their battles in healthy ways. Sometimes just being there, listening, or offering a small bit of kindness can be the thing that helps someone start to heal, even if they don't know how to ask for it. And that's exactly why James is the main character. His journey shows that even when you think the world is crushing you, there are people out there facing a hell you can't even imagine. Angela's story is tragic, not just because of what happened to her, but because of how real her pain feels. There are people like her in the real world, people carrying invisible baggage, holding it together on the outside while falling apart on the inside. You might never know how heavy that burden is until it's too late. If you ever find yourself feeling like Angela, or if you know someone who might be, just remember, peace, whether it's physical or mental, it's always worth a conversation. Angela's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. But unlike Angela, none of us are beyond help. Reaching out, whether for yourself or someone else, can make all the difference.